Okay.
Hello.
Can somebody just tell me if they can hear me?
Hey, yes, got you.
Hello.
Say it again. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear
Yes.
you.
Again.
Yeah.
I'm so scared of that now.
I got panicked for a minute, Jason.
I know. I did too. Okay. Thank you, Courtney. If you guys, I don't know if you guys know who Courtney is, but Courtney is our agricultural administrator at CC Ulster, and she's basically the backbone, the heart, the lungs, and probably the feet of our organization. So she's here tonight in case something goes wrong. We always need to have a backup, and it's been really great to have her here. So thank you for listening, Courtney. So everybody, I gave you guys some homework, but I'm a little worried we're not gonna be able to get through this tonight because it's so very much stuff. So I am completely willing to do another one of these in a couple of weeks. If we don't get through everything, we can sit back and talk, or since there's so few of you in this, what we can do is set up individual consultations. So I think maybe that might be better.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Cool. We'll do that then, because you're going to see the content of tonight, and I try to lay it out, fencing and water, but everybody is so different. You almost can't do that, you know, we're so individualized. So let's get through tonight. Again, like you guys know, this is a conversation. It's not a lecture. So if you got something you want to say, just stop us right there and we'll get to it. And let's, without further ado, try to get through a ton of topics in very little time. Okay. So again, stop me if you need to talk, but I'm ready to go. Okay. So, okay, there we go. Rotational grazing, part 2. This is the nuts and bolts. These are two interesting pictures. On the left, that Gallagher charger, which is very expensive. That dumb little thing's $120. I don't use the fault finder, which is where it says 0 amps, which is amazing. That means my entire fence, 120 acres, that one day was pulsing 8,000 kilovolts with 0 interference. That never happened before. I mean, that's before the grass grows and touches it. But I was very happy with that because I'd worked on that friggin' fence all year. This other picture is a grazing stick. So any of you who watched the videos or checked out some of the homework assignments I gave you was to try to find one of these for yourself. I normally can give them out if I see you, but obviously that's not happening now. And you got to get them to the NRCS. It's your tax money. Get one. That's some grass, man. That's like June, or no, that's probably late May, early June on my farm. That grass is up to my nose. I'm 6'2". So that shows you the power of, in my opinion, regenerative agriculture. This is really after an entire winter of rest, to be fair. This is orchard grass, so it's really growing high, but this is the kind of growth that I want to see in every single one of my paddocks. It's so high that my like grazing stick doesn't even go close to that high up there. So, you have a good like 5 feet of forage. That's some serious forage. Now, again, the cattle, like I was telling you, aren't going to be able to use all that. They're going to trample an awful lot of that because it's so high, but that's okay. There's no such thing as wasted forage in our system here. I just want to review real quick what rotational grazing is. We talked about how you control the intensity, the duration, and the recovery of your pastures. Remember, I still want to make these. I got to make a note. You are a grass farmer. You are stewarding grass to feed livestock. Keep that in mind. If you run out of resources, if you run out of food, then you got to buy it, and that's a major problem for you. And you determine the size and number of paddock, which is affected by all of those things that we talked about. I asked each of you to bring a map. If we get to it, we'll get to it. If not, during those individual consultations, we can run through those maps and take a look. But the exercise is just to get you thinking about how these things would work best for you. And 'tis the season for soil testing, so I highly recommend that everybody run some of that too. I've talked a little bit about this last week too, but it's still super important. I want to talk about this just for a second about setting your goals. As grass farmers, you need to pretty much always be continuously improving the land that you're on. If you're not, then you're degrading it. And that means your animal performance and resilience and just general toughness is going to get worse every year. So if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. Then again, we talked a lot about, well, let me get through this. Improving pastures is pretty much going to be always your goal. So you need to meter that with animal performance. We want to extend the grazing season, a lot of us, but you really need to have the land to do that. We all want to lower feed costs. This is probably the best way you can do that is rotational grazing. You want a better animal performance, cattle eat grass, bring the cattle to the grass, don't bring the grass to the cattle. It's pretty self-explanatory. We've been sold, and I'm going to use that word, we have been sold a ton of magic bullets to put weight on animals, but they're not natural. They're not that effective, and they end up costing us more money than it would be if we just fed them grass. So better animal performance, earning income through a niche market. Okay, you are not sustainable if you're not making money. If you're out of business, you're not sustainable. So you're gonna have to make sacrifices in the beginning. Joel Salatin used to always say this. He goes, you can be a nudist, you can be a Buddhist, but you can't be a nudist Buddhist. Now, I disagree. I think you can, but I get what he's saying. If you have a million ideals and ideas, you can't throw them all in at once because they're incompatible. You have to work up. And that's what I can help you decide as far as setting goals to be the most sustainable, to be a really good steward of your land. You can't just automatically do that. The land has been damaged. Our agricultural system is a little bit, it's definitely damaged. And so you can't repair all those things in 1 year. Just keep that in mind, please. I get a lot of people telling me, I'm going to be the most sustainable farm on earth, and I'm going to raise 1,000 cattle a year, and they're going to be so fat, everyone will buy them. I don't think so. You got to go slow. When I meet with you, we will talk about your goals for the season. Then I hope you'll check up come October and see how you did. And if you didn't do it, we'll adjust. No big deal. Improving holding capacity of water is a huge one. It's not how much water you have, it's how much you can keep. Remember that. A lot of these farms out here with very little vegetation, we're going to get 3 inches of rain here in May, and it will all wash away along with all their soil into the local streams. If you have a lot of vegetative matter on there, if you have a cushion on the earth, you will retain that water. It will be held in the roots, it will be held in the rhizomes, it will be held in the soil, and you can take it back up and use it. And then improving your overall quality of life. A lot of folks want to farm because they love to farm. I'm the same way. I got the bug. So again, if these are your goals, we need to work on them in a way that is compatible with your pasture management. So forget that one. I talked about this a lot, but it's super important. And right here, it just says it. I love this picture. How beautiful is that? That's like the best time of day. First thing in the morning when it's foggy. He's got some gloves on. Not really sure why, but he's obviously got some planted forage here. And this is going to be they're going to be really happy, those cattle. You can't improve pastures and run race cars. It's really kind of incompatible to say that you're going to really improve your pastures and run really high finishing animals like stockers or finishing animals. You can do it, but you're going to need to lower the carrying capacity of your land. You're going to have to run fewer of those race cars. You can do one thing really well, or you can do two things kind of well. What do you want to do? That's up to you. I'm happy to help you do both. And the general rule of thumb, and I wrote a whole article on like current farmer things that make sense, even old school stuff that still makes sense now. And one of the things they always say is always improve your best pastures first, okay? Because if you start improving your worst pastures first, you have a bunch of mediocre pastures. But if you have like a bunch of best pastures and then keep moving on, it creates more forage for you overall. Also, if you don't use a tool for a year, you might want to think of get rid of it. That's another one I really like. So why do we rotate? We rotate to meet our goals. We rotate because we want to bring the animals to the food, and we rotate to improve our pasture quality. Do we have to rotate? Absolutely not. It doesn't work for everybody. Don't get caught up in a paradigm that's in your head. You are working for the land. What does the land need this week? Does it need to rotate? It might not. Does it work for me to rotate when I have 15 soccer games to go to with the kids? Maybe not. So again, we can work around your life. This is your farm. And we know the interest, control, intensity, duration, and recovery. And you must plan for it to work. The number one difference between farms that are successful and sustainable and lasting and those who are not, that I see, is writing your plan down. Being able to reassess what you were trying to do, because it's easy to forget. You don't know where you're going unless you know where you've been. So we got to plan for the future. I'll have a slide about that later. Okay, finally, after my philosophical beginning, here we go into the real stuff. Fencing for rotational grazing, okay? There's a few different kinds. You're gonna need a perimeter fence to begin with. You can't have your cattle getting out. You're also gonna need insurance because they will get out. Your cattle will get out. Every year I lose cattle. Last year I had someone else's cattle on my land. Someone called me, told me my white bull was out running around. Well, I don't have a bull and I don't have any white cattle. There were 3 bulls in my paddocks when I got there. So animals may even come in too. You need a robust fence. Back in the day, everyone used barbed wire. It's a decent deterrent. It worked well for the Midwest. It doesn't work as well here. You can't electrify it. And none of these barriers are really a permanent barrier for a cow. If a thing weighs 1,000 pounds, it'll get through there if it needs to, believe me. And high tensile is the same. But what's so great about high tensile fence is it's so malleable. You can really move it around and up and around different features. You can get through it if you need to, if it's unelectrified. It's cheap compared to a lot of things. It's a single strand. And the only thing that really costs you a lot of money is the energizer. Oh, and if a tree falls on it, it's usually pretty much okay. I mean, you're going to have many trees fall on your fence at some point. Hopefully it doesn't hit a post. But if it does, literally, you can pretty much usually clean that tree up and then tighten up that fence with you. Or excuse me, tighten up your strainers on the fence and fix it. It's really nice. We have these perimeter fences and electrified because we want to use it to concentrate the animals in one place. We're going to use the fence as a predator. So if these are cattle are like the bison, the fence is the wolf or the bear that's concentrating them all together. And that's our goal. Our fence keeps our animals in and it keeps them where we want them. So electric fences really are the most practical and easiest way to do that. I use polywire cross fences with 1/4-inch polywire tape, or not tape, excuse me, rope. It works great. I love it. It's highly visible. The cattle can see it. A lot of mistake that beginners make, often I see in rotational grazing, is using a cord that's too small to be seen by the cattle. They have different eyes than us. They see different hues and different colors and different shades. So you got to make it really visible for them to understand it's going to shock them. If they come up to it and they run through it, they're not going to get a shock. They're not going to know that does anything. And they're going to actually be reinforced to run through that because they were successful doing it once. So let's talk some more about fencing though. I highly recommend you use the electric fence. I'm going to talk pretty much exclusively about that because really your options are electric, barbed wire, or wood. Wood is not going to be, you're not going to be able to build a 5,000-foot wooden fence. It'd be too expensive. Barbed wire is okay, like I said, but electric just serves so many more purposes, even as a predator deterrent. Now, I've never lost an animal to a coyote. Has anyone here? Because anybody? No? I get a lot of people tell me they want to come hunt my coyotes on the land because they kill my cattle. Nah, newsflash, they're out there. The way that I deal with coyotes is when I cut a tree down that falls on my fence, I'll leave a brush pile in the field. I don't care. I'm not growing a golf course. I mean, it goes away in 3 years. What that is this haven for all kinds of rodents, and that's what coyotes eat. And I'm not saying that solves my problem, but I provide alternative food for the livestock, for the predators that I want to take care of. And same with the hawks and owls. If you have chickens, if you have a good source of rabbits, if you have a rabbit den that you can nurture and make grow prey, everybody wins. So keep that in mind. Back to fence. The 3 big things we have are the energizer, the grounding system, and the fence design itself, okay? Choosing an energizer. This is tough. Even I had a mistake this year. I bought one. I have it sitting right here. I'm so mad at it. I bought a very expensive American-made charger, and it died, and I was upset. I can't tell you guys what to buy, but I can tell you this charger up here on the top right, this black and orange one is an excellent choice. It's from New Zealand. They've been grazing for years down there. Don't go buy the cheapest one that you can find at Tractor Supply, please, or Agway or any other ag store. You gotta buy a good quality charger. It's the most important part of your system. There's joules and pulses and all this stuff, but basically the simple calculation is, oh, here we go. I love this. So it took me a while to figure this out and talking to a lot of people. 1 joule basically powers 3 miles. So if you have 3-wire fence, I recommend you have either 3 or 5-wire. I have both. 3 times 15 is 15 miles. You need 15 miles of thing. So you need to divide whatever your miles of fence is by 3, and that'll tell you how many joules you have. So this 15 miles of fences is going to require 5 joules to keep that fence nice and hot for your animals, to keep them in and the predators out. So do your calculations. I have a 27 joule fence right now. I think it cost me about $500. Cover it, don't let it get wet, protect the heck out of it if you can. Unfortunately, I don't have a barn, so mine is pretty much open to elements, but it's got a Rubbermaid container of it. It's actually covered also in a trash bag. So that's your calculation for your joules. Don't believe the hype it says, Bauer's 5 million. The calculations are off, it's not right. We used to use high impedance chargers with a longer pulse, and that would start fires all the time. Now we have a low impedance with a quick pulse that's a higher energy, so boom, boom. And that's not enough energy to start a fire, which is great because now 'tis the season. I've been to 3 brush fires in the last week around here because it's so dry. Please don't have fires this time of year. Also, please don't buy a high impedance fence charger. They're probably illegal now and they're super dangerous. And they've killed people in the past. But I can assure you that I have been shocked on the highest level in the worst way possible by my fence. And I was okay. The way I run my fence, and I don't know if I talk about this in here, when I have a 3 fence or a 5 fence, I go hot, ground, hot, ground, hot, or hot, ground, hot, if it's a 3 fence. That ground wire in the middle is directly grounded out into a ground peg. Last year, I forgot to shut the fence off. I have no idea how. And I came through the fence and my neck and my head touched the top piece and I grabbed the ground with my head and I just saw a blinding blue light. I screamed, like I made noise and I fell to the ground because it shocked me so hard. I didn't die. It hurt like hell. But I just want to reassure you, it's not going to kill anybody, these low impeded ones, but it will wake you up if you touch both of the ones. And that's what we want the cattle to do. Sorry, let me finish that thought. If the top is energized and the middle is grounded, that cattle head's going to go like this and it's going to get a bite. And And they will test the fence. It doesn't hurt them. They have, you know, half-inch thick skin. It's for their own protection. God forbid they get out. We don't get hit by a car. I find that electric fences are very humane, and by and large, I'm the one who's shocked the most. Okay, let's get real. This is where it gets tough. You really want to be able to plug it in. I'm telling you right off the bat. Solar is great, but doesn't work well in the winter. It doesn't work well when there's not a lot of sunlight, obviously. They're getting better, but I don't think I can have a solar panel big enough to power my fence at 27 joules. Ideally, you can plug that sucker in. If you can't, solar is okay. And there's also battery powers, which I've also used in the past too. Now I have these as emergency backup energizers if I need them. Sometimes I need to keep a couple cows somewhere for some reason, and I can grab that portable one that's solar and bring it out there. The battery ones are better though, because what it has is you have to, don't forget, if you buy a solar battery power charger, you still have to buy the $150 battery on top of the price. That battery can hold energy overnight and cloudy days to keep that thing pulsing, and they can be very strong, but I don't know that they can necessarily cycle through a fence of my size, so I had to go with a plug-in. So there are some excellent fence makers. Since this is such a specialized class, I'm gonna tell you, Premier makes all kinds of excellent stuff, and they're really great to answer questions. So if you are looking to start investigating different chargers, Premier is a great place to start, and they have excellent customer service. So otherwise, it's really tough to find this stuff on your own. I'm lucky enough to have a Gallagher dealer in Chatham, New York, and he's a great source for me, and he's also a repair person, so I can go talk to him. Grounding is the biggest mistake I would think that people make with fencing systems. It has to be well grounded, and if it's not going to work right. I can show you guys later if we have questions, if you're setting up your fence, how to test the grounding of it. But I guarantee you, like a fence of my size, I really need like 10 to 12 grounding rods, 6 feet in the ground. I know it sounds excessive, but if you don't have current flow via the ground, you're not going to have a good shot. Another thing that I do is I told you the middle wire or the middle ones are grounded directly on my system. The opposite side from where my energizer is, you know, miles away almost, I will go ground those wires out there. I'll bring grounding wires, I'll pound them in the ground and hook them up. And that makes sure that I'm grounded on the other side and really close. The closer the ground, if you can believe it, if the cow is 2 miles away, that charge is coming through that fence all the way that far. If I can make it closer, it'll be more immediate. Not instant, but pretty much immediate. I talked about this. For your interior fencing, you could use metal, but it's pretty unwieldy and it's hard to store. So you're really going to want either poly tape or poly wire. Tape is often used for horses. I'm not really sure why. I know their eyes are different. Maybe they see it better. Again, I use the 1/2 inch. I like it thick. I like it black and white or yellow and white because it throws off your eyes and it really messes the cows up. Black and white forms an optical illusion that just messes you up. If you really want to stop a cow from doing something, you can offset an electric fence. And I do that often. Like when I'm loading cattle, I'll put one I'll put one poly wire across, then I'll offset another one about 2 feet back, higher or lower than it. And it really confuses the heck out of them because there's space and the optical illusion. It confuses me too when I look at it. So spend the money to get the best stuff that you can afford, without a doubt. And again, it's not going to be at your local agricultural supply stores. Those are not where you find quality stuff. This is stuff you really got to sink money into, and it's not a ton of money really, but this is one of the instances where quality stuff will really go a long way. Here's some pictures of what I'm talking about. On the right-hand side is a high tensile fence. You can see how it moves with the terrain. It's great. Over here on the bottom, this reel. Oh, I don't know if I talk about reels. Yeah, I do. Okay. That's a nice Gallagher reel. I only know that because it's orange. That's like polystrand. I consider that personally to be too thin for my uses. But what's cool about this is look at this picture. You can see this person has hung that reel onto their high tensile fence. And then you can actually get alligator clips. And I didn't learn this till years ago. You can just hook it right on from the fence onto that reel and it will power that interior line. So if you have enough juice going through your high tensile perimeter fence, like you should always buy higher, you can conceivably power all of your inside fences off of that fence as well. Usually our fences aren't more than 100 yards. And if they are, you need to change something up probably. So that isn't going to add that much line to your overall fencing needs. And the top picture is that poly tape I was talking about. It's great because you can make this this little fenced off area for these horses and just leave them there for a while and rotate them around if you need to. You're going to need other stuff other than Energizer. You're going to need T-posts or any kind of plastic posts. Again, buy the good stuff. Buy the 2-pronged posts if you can. They're way better. They're more durable and they're a lot easier to use in the winter. And those are what I'm calling plastic step-in posts. There's fiberglass and there's metal. A lot of people use a combination of all three, depending on what you need, and the permanence that will come with experience for you. You need a fence tester, but you don't need the $120 one that I have that shows you amperage and where the fence is shorting. In my opinion, it doesn't work well. There's other tests that are more advanced that I can show you how to do, like literally test, you're just gonna lay metal on the fence to check the grounding. That will help you assess where you are losing juice and having to buy an $80, a charger that costs $80 more than a typical one. I'm just saying, you probably don't need it. Reels are gonna be crazy. I bought so many crappy reels in my life, man. The best ones are the Gallagher ones. They're shaped, they're heavy, they're big plastic. They make some really big reels, and they're 3-to-1 geared. So every turn will turn the inside piece 3 times. You don't want 1-to-1. 100 yards of rolling up will take you 10 minutes. That'll drive you nuts, believe me. So get a high quality reel. To tell you the truth, a good quality reel is going to cost you 80 to 100 bucks, but it should last you at least 5 years if you don't leave them out in the sun all day, if you can help it, especially all winter. Bring them in, put them under cover, and let them recover, because we all know plastic degrades pretty quickly. Oh, here's some voltage requirements. Again, if you're running cattle, you can get by with just 3-strand high tensile, no big deal. 36 inches, another 8 inches from that, another 8 inches up. Again, though, it's a deterrent. A cow could easily jump over that, and I've seen it. But here are the preferred voltage requirements on here. So cattle 4 to 5, for training 8 to 10. Okay, simple as that. 8,000 is really, that's why I was so happy when I got that 8 on that day, because it was the first day the cattle were coming to the farm soon. I'll talk more about that later. But these are your basic voltage requirements. Look at the goats for a second though, and the sheep. They require much higher voltage. Sheep, obviously, because a lot of the times they're covered in a really thick layer of wool, and goats are just maniacs, so they need higher stuff anyway. So we'll talk about multi-species grazing a little bit later. Real quick, this is a video. I'm not going to watch it because I'm not set up for videos today, but setting up your electric fence training area is super important. This video is this is a video of the cattle discovering the fence. They're getting a bite from it, and it scares them. But what happens is they're going to freak out. So what I've learned over the years, I think I spoke about this last week, is how I do my training area. I'll send this out in the homework or the update this week. I want them to see the fence and I want them to touch it. So let's say I bring 50 cows one day, which is pretty common for me. I'll back them up. We let them out into a very large area. Inside of that area is a water and some treats. And outside there too is going to be my electric fence that's highly visible. I will have streamers hanging from it. I'll have all kinds of stuff. And I'll also have streamers all over the perimeter fence, because these animals sometimes come off that trailer. They're going to want to run. They're excited. They're scared. They're worried. So they just kind of do a loop or a couple loops and stay away from me. And I let them be the first day. I don't even mess with them. My brood cow is out there with usually a friend, and they can calm them down and get them together. Anyway, my point is, I will also take cotton balls or other things and put weird smells in them, like vanilla extract, like apple. And what I want them to do is come up and sniff that and get shocked by the fence. I know it sounds cruel, but again, we know it's for their safety and it's not that bad. So what you want to do is make it so that fence is out there in the middle of the field and they have to walk around it to get to the water. Chances are some of them will try to go through it. They'll get a little snap and they'll learn about the fence. Super important. With pigs, it's even crazier to do. If anyone wants to get raising pigs, let me know, because I got a lot to say about electric fences in them. I talked about this, and here's some reindeer or elk, with some really beautiful bears. But the fence is your predator. The fence is going to do what the wolves and bears did to the bison thousands of years ago. They concentrated them, just like we do, on a small paddock, so they eat everything there. They, with all intents and purposes, destroy everything there, and then they leave it because the bear chased them off. They won't come back for a long time and let it recover. I'm going to send this video out next week. It's setting up fences with John Siskovich, who's in New York. He's got great videos. He's an excellent applied farmer, and he's really getting it done. But it's literally him setting up his interior fences for his moves. So he actually mows under every single fence. I don't think that I would do that. But something I do see that he does, and we talked about this last week, is you need to see your animals every day. The move is the best part of my day. It's so much fun. You get up, the sun is shining, it's 70 degrees, the birds are out there. It's like God's country. You feel one with nature. You see your cattle, they're ready to move. You're going to go out there, you're going to open the fence, they're all going to walk past you. That's the routine. Once the cattle know that, they're on your side. And especially too, keep in mind from a behavioral perspective, every time you move cattle, every time you call them, you want to give them something good. And really, honestly, there's nothing better than a full plate of pasture. So they're going to be very excited to move, and they're going to want to move. Don't forget, okay, everybody's got a call. Here's mine. Yip, yip, yip. My dog's probably freaking out because she's terrified of cattle. She knows when she hears that they're coming, so she takes off. So she probably took off. But I don't recommend you have a personal call unless you can recreate it. And that's just because when someone comes to watch your farm, they're not going to be able to do your call unless you teach them to do it. So you may want to invest in a bell, which I've used in the past with certain herds, and it works great. Don't use a car horn because it's a great way to get cattle running towards the road or someone stealing them. But it is important to have a routine. It is important to have a way to call the cattle to you. And I just want to mention that because this all will be integrated into your daily move. So when I first started, I moved my water, and we'll talk about water next, with my tractor or my truck. I would fill a 275-gallon tote, bring it out there, and use that to gravity feed into the water. It's a huge waste of resources to do that. Moving water is super inefficient. One of my mentors, Mick Bessier, from Cornell, actually, when I first started farming, came out to my farm and took one look at what I was doing and raised his eyebrow. And from a Midwestern Oklahoma guy, I know that was like, what are you doing? So he had a lot to say about that. And we really worked my grazing water system till about 2 years ago. And I got it pretty much feeling good. Without further ado, let's talk about water. It's super important. If we're moving cattle, we're going to have to move water. They cannot be in the water. I showed you a picture last week. They will ruin your ponds. They will destroy your streams. They will poop in it. And NRCS and the government's not going to be happy with that anyway. It's going to ruin your water. You can allow small access. If you look at this picture here, you can see they've got a cutout. I think that's what I would call that, with electric wire over it. I mean, cattle don't really swim that well, so I don't think they'd go too far. You got to size this to your herd. If this is far away, your cattle are going to walk as a herd to get there. They're not going to all fit in there at once. You're going to have a lot of tussling there, and they're going to easily run over your fences, I guarantee it. If there's a scarce resource like water or food, the cattle are going to fight over it, and the dominant ones are going to win. And the lower caste folks, or the lower people on totem pole, the less dominant cattle, that's what I want to say, are really going to suffer because they're not going to get water. I'm serious. So you really got to make sure you size your water to your needs. We're going to talk about that. This other picture here, you can just see where the cattle have just destroyed the bank of that. And that what was a nice, once cut stream is now completely denuded and flat. So the water just goes away. It'll just slip underground and disappear. So I got to either use water or build a lane, move water. I built a lane once. I'm not doing it again. I thought I could save myself a lot of time in the summer. I left my water in one spot. I was able to pump there every day. Cool. And I had a lane that went through the center of the farm, and every paddock I could slip them into the lane to come back. Well, that lane took a lot of abuse. I don't think you can really have a lane like dairy guys, dairy women do, without having gravel on it. It needs to be reinforced because they're going to spend time in there. Unfortunately, the cattle don't understand the concept of rotating. So they'll come to the water and forget to walk back to the food. So they spend 8 hours in that lane, it's just destroyed, or stand next to the water before they walk back to the original paddock. If you need to do a lane, it is possible. I can help you do it, but we got to talk about accessibility and strengthening it. Now, I told you about using a truck to move water to the animals. It's not efficient. I don't think it's worth it. We have modern pumps that run on all types of things that can move water. Remember, water weighs almost 10 pounds per gallon. It's really heavy. So it's going to take a lot of force to move it. Pumping water to the cattle is really what you need to do. And there's a lot of different systems to do that. There's wells. If you have a well, you're in great shape because you're going to have pressure. You can probably push around the whole farm. If you have ponds and streams like I do, I push water up 100 feet into a 2,000-gallon tank, and I gravity feed it down over miles of my farm. That works really well for me too because I have unlimited water. Typically, I know it's not going to run out, and I'll talk more about how I do it. I also use a lot of gas-powered water pumps for emergencies because you need to have a backup. Redundancy is key always with livestock. If some system fails, you need to have a way to get those animals relief immediately, especially when it's 90 degrees and the farm owner cuts a hole in your water line, messing around on the ATV, and you're at this county fair until 10 p.m. You get back and your cattle are so distressed you don't even think they're going to live. That's when that gas-powered pump you can throw in the water and your extra stock tank you can fill up right then and there really comes in handy. Ram pumps. Oh, we got a question in the chat. Do you pump the previous day water into the new tote? I don't know exactly what you mean. Can you clarify? Do you mean from the reservoir?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I gotcha.
Okay. Yeah. So like if you were going to not move the water, would you have multiple totes? So like let's say you had like a few paddocks set up and you're moving them every day. So on day 2, when you're pumping water into the day 2 tote, would you also drain the water of day 1's tote, or would you dump it, or like how does
Yeah,
that work?
you have to dump it. I mean, because if you don't, it's going to get nasty, right? And like
Yeah.
a lot of animals die in those too. I'm telling you right now, another reason to go see your animals every day. Animals often die in stock tanks, squirrels, chipmunks, and birds all the time. So that will foul the water for all the animals. They won't drink it very quickly. So
And then
yeah, go ahead.
do you just do you just have 2 totes and you drag them like alternately every day?
Oh, so actually, I only use one tote because one tote gets me 2 days. So if I have a perimeter, or excuse me, if I have a here's my line,
Oh, yeah.
and each side is one, I can just move the line a little over and leave a stock tank there.
Oh, yeah.
Move it over day 2. So I don't have to move it. So I don't have to move it every 2 days. And then yes, I drag it, but they're heavy. I can still do it, but I'm getting older and I can't do it as well. I used to just be able to carry it over my head, but now I'm getting older, I like to drag it. And that's where having an ATV or a truck really comes in handy, especially for the mineral feeder. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
And we'll talk more too about it. Ram pumps are my favorite thing in the world. I wish they were there everywhere. They are a pump that requires no energy, no electricity, no gas to pump water, although it wastes 90% of the water. You put it in a stream, it has to have a fall, and it can push water uphill very easily. If anyone's interested in that, it's a kind of an ancient technology, not ancient, from the 1800s, but it's really neat technology. But you have to have waterfall. You got to have at least 10 feet of difference in a stream or a waterfall to really pump water efficiently, but it's a great system. Wind pumps are okay. They're fragile. Hand pumps are not you're gonna be pumping thousands of gallons of water. There's also some that fit into streams, but they're also very fragile too, in my opinion, and don't work that well. So really, your best options are, you don't have a well, you can use a well pump, which is what I do, and fill a reservoir and let that gravity feed down. Or you can use a gas powered pump if you don't have very far to go. Like I can fill my 2,000 gallon reservoir with a $100 gas pump, no problem. But my reservoir is 100 feet up and a gas pump really can't pump that high. So what I have is I have a completely standalone generator that sits in my field all year long that I power with gasoline. That gasoline powered generator powers a jet pump, which is a well pump and works great. And that can pump thousands, in about 4 hours, it can pump about 2,000 gallons of water. The gas runs out, electricity dies, pump shuts off, I start again the next day. If you just have the gas, all you need to do is just find the appropriate line to go in. And the kind of pump you want is called a trash pump. That's the kind of pump you want to pump water. And you can get them in 3-inch and 2-inch outlets. And they work really great too. Obviously, you need to maintain it because gasoline can be fickle, small engines. But again, when I talk to each of you separately, we can talk about all this stuff. Here's what Carrie was asking about water tanks. There's a million different kinds. Up here, you see how much water they need per day. I like the standard stock tanks. I like to use 100 gallon. It fits my needs. I've used 100 gallon up to 70 cattle. As long as they're not running out and they don't have to walk too far, there's not going to be competition for a scarce resource. If that thing is always full, we're going to be in good shape. I want to see. Okay, I don't have pictures of this. I thought I did. Okay, real quick. Yours is going to probably look something like this, especially if you're rotating. So just bear with me. I've got my pump. I'm pumping water up to my reservoir on top of a hill, 2,000 gallons. Out of the bottom of that reservoir comes a line, and that line goes to many parts of my farm. Every 100 feet, I have to connect 2 pieces of line. In that connection, I bought connections that allow me to connect a line, a garden hose onto there, if you will, basically. So I've got my main water lines that are 1.5 inches wide, which is what I need. Then I can plug into that line anywhere I want and draw water out of it with a garden hose. And the way you do that is they make this thing called a Joby float, J-O-B, and I can send some links to it. I don't know who that is, but he invented this. It's basically a female receiver that you screw onto your main water line. Then you have a male receiver that goes into the female with a garden hose, and that feeds your automatic water in your 100-gallon stock tank. So this 100-gallon stock tank, this little black one, would have an automatic float in it, also called a Joby float. And as water goes down, it refills automatically. So you have that gravity and that pressure there, it'll feed all day. Now you can, if you don't have a lot of cattle, you can just fill the 100-gallon one, which is probably what Carrie's talking about, and then move on the next day and dump it out. I hate wasting water though, but in that regard, you're gonna have to do it. I shouldn't have said that. There's nothing wrong with wasting water. Waste as much water as you can because it's gonna go back on your pasture, and it's not worth it to limit the cattle in anything you do. If you're trying to put weight on a cow And you really can't limit its food or water, okay? And that's a great recipe for limiting stuff. So make sure that when you come back that day, there is plenty of water still left in there. If there isn't, you're gonna have to figure something else out. This is a video, but we're not gonna watch it, NRCS stuff. These are really nice, really expensive government-funded watering systems. So these are obviously fed from underground. They're underground water lines. Oh, I didn't mention this. And again, it's so varied. We'll get to it as I talk to each of you individually. I run all of my line on top of the grass. It's black, but by the end of summer, it's covered in grass and it doesn't get hot or warm up. So the water actually stays cool in there. And then if I have a problem, which I often do, I don't have to dig it up to unbury it. Plus, I don't own my land. I don't want anything permanent there. And if I really needed to, I could pick it all up and leave in a second. So the more mutable, the more adaptive you can make your water system, the much happier you'll be. So make sure when we start planning this out that we plan for variability as we move along. That's water and fencing. Does anybody have anything they want to talk about? We got that a lot quicker than I thought. Okay, let's keep moving on. Minerals. Let's what's next. I was messing with this earlier. Looks like I put an accidental blank screen in here. We do have a selenium deficiency in the Northeast. It's true. It's not crazy, but if you're going to be breeding, and generally for best practices, you're going to need to have salt and minerals with selenium in it. You can buy those cheapo ones, the brown and the gray ones, and they're not terrible, but I don't really trust what's in them sometimes. I don't know. You can also buy like a 15 or 12 or 25 free choice mineral, but I'll tell you what, it's not worth it. The studies are done. I don't have his book here. Fred Provenza, the animal behaviorist, did a bunch of studies on if animals can adjust their micronutrients based on their needs, and they cannot. Just like if you were experiencing scurvy, you're not going to crave orange or citrus. Your body doesn't go that far. Now, macronutrients, protein, energy, stuff like that, the big boys, that you will be drawn towards, depending on the type of food that will provide it. But this stuff, no. So don't buy the hype about having 15 different types of minerals out there. Get yourself, it's perfectly a great idea to have separate salt and separate minerals. But if you are going to have that stuff with free choice, make sure it's in front of them all the time. When you first give it to them, they're going to eat a ton of it, and you're going to spend a lot of money. A lot of people like to use the red clay, but in my mind, I'm like, why? My cattle eat so much dirt out there. They eat dirt all the time. And I don't really think I need to be buying dirt from the other side of the country to ship here for them to eat, because they got what they need here. If they have a full mineral spectrum, they have salt, and they have the access to dirt, which most cattle don't in feedlots. Remember, they only have access to manure or dirt covered in manure. They should be just fine. It's the same with the seaweed thing. A woman called me today, I talked to her on Tuesday about buying seaweed to decrease the methane in her cows. Methane is not nearly as pernicious as people think. It's been, bastardized. Livestock have been blamed for this, and really there's a lot of other big corporate interests that are producing a lot of the methane that we're having in the atmosphere. But then again, how many resources does it take to harvest seaweed on the other side of the earth, ship it here, fly it here, drive it here, stock it on a shelf or wherever, or then ship it and then feed it to your animals? That's got to be a carbon net loss for you overall, or a methane net loss. So my point is to keep your system holistic as a whole, and use the things that are closest to you that you can use, that are local. That's what local trumps organic every time in my mind, for the most part. That money stays local. If I'm buying organic corn and it's coming from the rainforest, well, they chop down a forest. I mean, I'm being extreme here. They chop down a forest, they ruin that land, they fertilize it with gosh knows what, and then they ship that organic grain 10,000 miles to my farm. Again, that can't be like a carbon neutral thing when I can buy corn right down the street. Now, yes, there may have been some pesticides on it, but that doesn't mean there weren't pesticides on the organic one down south. Sorry, I'm going off on this. My point is, you gotta just keep focusing on what's important to you and what you need for your animals and your pasture. You don't need all the stuff they're trying to sell you. Farmers have been sold out of business for the last 50 years, since probably the invention of petrochemicals as fertilizer. We've been sold these magic bullets, and all they've done is made us poorer, our land crappier, and our cattle less healthy. So don't go buy all kinds of crazy stuff, please, for minerals. Cattle can get by with a very simple program. If you are organic, though, and I'm not saying anything about organic actually works very well for cattle, because again, grass grows organically, no problem. We don't have to ship it here. That's a great idea. But remember, if you are organic, you need to get organically certified minerals. I showed this picture here. This is what you guys kind of did for homework, but this is a kind of a neat way to look at it. So if you can get your Google Earth pictures and actually get a printout to draw on it, is my favorite thing to do. The NRCS may be able to help you to do that. I will do you a grazing plan. If you're in my area, I'm happy to do it. And even if you're not, I'm happy to talk to you too. NRCS will come out and do a really, really nice grazing plan for you. And that's how you get EQIP grants. EQIP grants are federal grants for protecting water. I've received 2 in the last 10 years for close to $100,000. And the whole point of that is to protect our water system and our watershed. And it was basically, they bought me fence. But my point is, if you get the NRCS, like I told you guys to contact them, make contact with them, have them come to your farm, maybe I'll come too. They design this grazing plan and they can see where your deficits are. And some of that funding may come down the line for you to help improve your farm. And what they're going on to do here is where it says CREP program, 15 acres, like they'll help dig these ponds, they'll help figure out where these fences should be, and they'll help figure out how to get water to you. So anyway, you can see this person has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different paddocks. You know the rule from last week. You don't really want to spend more than 4 days on any area. So if I was looking at this plan, I would probably want to see them tightened up, unless there's like a lot of cattle in here. Just for shits and giggles, so you guys know, I usually run 50 cattle on about a half an acre twice a day, or an acre, depending on the quality of forage. So you can really mob them up, and that's your best case. But again, you can never allow them to run out of resources. So if you want to push the pasture hard for animal performance and for pasture improvement, you're gonna have to move them twice a day to make sure they can always be full. Making your moves. I talked about this already. Opinions are like neighbors. Everybody has one. Do you want to move them in the morning or the afternoon? Falton, where I got my start talking with him, moves in the afternoon at 4 p.m., I believe. I like the morning because, like I said, I like to be out there early and seeing the beauty of the land and the cattle out there together. Or if you're moving twice a day, what you don't want to be doing is moving in the heat of the day. Heat is far more detrimental to cattle than the cold. Their ideal temp is about 43 degrees. So today they are very happy. If it wasn't raining, they'd be perfect. It's like 43 here right now. But heat is really bad for them. Think about wearing a leather jacket with a fur coat on top of it while having a heater inside your belly. It's not easy for them to just get rid of the heat. So don't move them in the middle of the day. Don't stress them out in the middle of the day. And we'll talk about shade and heat stuff a little bit later. Also, don't worry about stragglers. You are a rancher and you're moving cattle, but you don't control them. They're their own lives. If you're yelling, you're wrong, period. And I've yelled a million times. Most of them yell at myself, but if you get to the point where you're yelling out of frustration, back it up. This is not a time to work. Take a walk, figure it out. If you yell at the cattle, behaviorally, it's going to set a really bad precedent for them. They're going to learn to fear you, and that's the last thing you want. You want them to respect you and be happy when they see you all the time. So when you do have the stragglers that are way behind, those are the less dominant cattle. They're not allowed to be with the main herd. They're kicked out. And no matter how much finagling and moving animals around, you're not going to get rid of that. There's always going to be the low people, the low cattle in the totem pole. So just let them take the time to get there. Spend the extra 10 minutes, bring a book, sit in the grass, go look at manure, find a new bug, but don't pressure them. Don't go running after them, pushing the thing. Same with calves. I don't fence calves in with cattle anymore. So when I'm breeding on a rotational system, the cows can walk they have free range of the whole farm. And I don't care because they can have all the best grass. They're my biggest growers typically. They'll usually go off as a group and come back, but they can slip under my fence and go off. But they always come back because they know where mama is. You got to remember, it is a physical bond, but I would say 90% of the bond between mother and child animals is psychological. And when you think of it that way, it's not just about milk, it's about comfort, it's about familiarity, it's about routine, and it's about organic needs. So just keep that in mind. You may not have to, again, wrangle up these calves as hard as you think you do too, okay? But patience is your best friend moving animals. I would now consider myself to be a very good stockman, and it took me 9 years to get there. So I've literally gotten to the point with some of the cattle, I know it sounds crazy, where I can literally flick my finger, just that much pressure, that change can get them to go where I want them, because we're working together every day. It should be rewarding, it should be fun, and I hope you all can come out to my place this summer and we can do some demonstrations when we do the bud box stuff. Oh, speak of the devil. Handling facilities, you're gonna need them, okay? You have to, what are you gonna do if an animal breaks its leg? What are you gonna do if an animal has a prolapsed vagina? What are you gonna do if, you need to move cattle on or off farm? So you gotta have corral space. I've used every kind, and this is what I've settled on now. Now, I told you my intake system. I don't want to intake them into a small area. I want to give them some room, let them be. Some people like to intake, or some people have to intake into a very small corral, and that's okay, as long as it's robust. It better be tough. Now, when I load or unload animals, this is not for training. This is not for first day. When I need to get animals on a trailer, I use what's called a bud box. In August, we're going to have a seminar. Maybe we could try to videotape it. To get Courtney and Tara to come out and help us out with that. It could be a great, because there's not a lot of information about this system. Made by Bud Williams, gave me permission to run these courses because he's actually passed away now, but he wants, you to be safe. You will get hurt by your cows. You're responsible, or the only thing you can change is how bad it's going to be. So you could have a stepped on foot, you have one break your pinky by kicking it like I did, or you can be trampled and killed. So you really need to take this seriously. They weigh a lot more than you. And the more you understand the cattle, their behavior, the more time you spend with them, the more you will understand when you're in a bad situation. Basically, the worst place you could ever be is between a cow and its exit, especially if it's alone. Don't do it. You do not want to have a traumatic experience in the corral. Far too many times I go move cattle with people and they're screaming and banging on the metal and yelling. What the hell? The cattle are just on sensory overload. They're running in circles. No yelling, no banging is allowed. We move the cattle in, we wish them along. We might give them a tap on the butt or have a little stick. Because if you make it traumatic, they're never going to want to come back to there. They're going to see that crowd and they're going to run away. They're going to get worked up just thinking about it. You made that. You made them get worked up by doing that. Remember that. It's on you to take control of the situation. This is a super dangerous situation too. I cannot stress that enough. I've never seen anyone killed, but I've seen a broken pelvis and I've seen someone unconscious from cattle in the last 5 years working in corrals. Another great thing too is to work them through. I'm not going to go through the bud box. I'm sorry. If you guys want to talk about it, I'm happy to. We're going to have the class in August. It's a little bit complicated and it takes really, really superb stockmanship skills. It takes a really calm, confident person around cattle. So as you design your system, the only thing I would tell you to do is make it movable. Get cattle panels. You can make a perfectly adequate corral out of just panels. It'll be a lot cheaper and it's not permanent. So when you mess up and put it on the wrong spot your first year, like I did, you can move that and it'll be better. Also, run them through it as part of their normal routine. I will often, my cattle panels are all in one spot of the farm. So what I'll do is I'll set them up during our normal rotation. I'll run them through it. Not a lot. I'll just make them walk through 2 sets of cattle panels. So they just get used to it. And then it becomes nothing to them. So when that day comes and I need to get them off the farm, which always comes, by the time they get into that corral, it's already too late. There's nothing to be scared about and they're used to the routine. So I highly recommend you use a bud box and use it appropriately. I'll send a video of the demonstration. Again, this looks really complicated, but it's not. And the problem is though, really, here's the one disadvantage to this system. You can really only have about 7 or 8 cattle at a time loading. So when I'm loading 50 cattle a day, I've got to take groups of 8 and funnel them in here and then load them and then close the trailer door, come back, get 8 more. That's the only downfall, but I'll never go back to using a typical corral after using a bud box. Okay, shade. Animals need shade, period. Well, they don't need shade. You don't need shade either, but you go spend 8 hours in the sun, see how you feel, how your body reacts to it, how healthy you are. Animals, they need to have shade to do well. If you have race cars or if you have mamas that are breeding, you're gonna need to keep them comfy. And the heat is really bad for them. I talked about this already. Anything over 70 is bad. Anything over 60 is tough. Anything over 80 is like deadly for cows. So I've never lost a cow, but they pant, they got to have water, they got to have shade, and they're not going to want to eat during the day anyway. So like I said on here, we don't want them to suffer at all. So you need to think about your grazing plan. When we talk about your rotation, I'm going to say, okay, when we sit down for future consultations, here's your spring rotation. Okay, you're going to hit the whole farm in 15 days. Great. But where are you going to be in August based on your rotation? Because what we want to get you is near shade. If you're not, you're going to have to move to shade. Now, they do make those shade trucks and shade things now. Like they come out and it's like unfolding shade cloth and the cattle can get under it. I've never used one. And obviously a tree is the same thing. It creates a lot of dead zones and that's okay. You can only do so much, but if the cattle are loafing under one spot, they're going to really impact that area. We know that. So it doesn't matter what kind of shade you have, you're going to have problems. So if you want to get a portable one, I don't know much about them. They cost a lot of money, I'll bet, and I'm not sure how durable they are. But what I do is something called limit grazing. And I don't know who told me it's called that or if I made it up, but that's what I call it. Because of the way my farm is, there are times where I can't have the animals in shade during the hottest part of the day. So what I do is I'll move them to where they're supposed to be first thing in the morning. I'm talking like 5 a.m., dawn, daylight, because that's when they're going to do most of the grazing. They need to eat then. And I want them to eat then because it's going to create heat inside of them. I want them to expel that heat as the day goes on before it gets super hot. 5 a.m., I move them and I'll usually go home and I'll come back in 3 to 4 hours, or unless I have work to do, I'll work on the farm because, 3 hours is only 8 a.m. anyway. And then what I'll do is I'll move the cattle before it's hot to an area with shade. And I call that limit grazing because I'm limiting the time that they're out in the open. So I will sometimes walk them a good half a mile while it's still cool. We're talking 8 a.m. We move to an area with shade. That's a sacrifice paddock for the year. That won't be typically grazed. That'll just be there for when I need it. I'll let them hang out there all day in that shade. We're not going to eat much. It's too hot anyway. When it gets over 70, 80, they're really going to start grazing at night too. Come the end of the day and late, 7, 8, when hopefully that heat's dissipating, I will very slowly and calmly get everybody up and move them back to their typical paddock where they're supposed to be. That doesn't have shade for the night. And then we repeat the process every day. It's a routine, they get used to it, but it allows me to get the most out of all of my goals. I'm using pasture responsibly. That sacrifice paddock is not going to be grazed like a typical one. We'll skip it when we come around to it. The cattle are full. They're not suffering in the sun, and they're having the time and the space to really relieve themselves of that heat. They have to get rid of it. They're going to pant. They're going to go nuts. So also watch your water. This isn't such a big deal with cattle because the grass grows over the water line. Oh, I didn't mention this. I run all of my water line directly under my fences, right? Makes sense because the cattle can step on it and they can break stuff real quick. In my system, if a cow were to step on one of the female receptors and break it, all of the water would drain out of my system because it's gravity fed. So 2,000 gallons would be gone just like that. So we don't want the cattle messing with it. So yeah, it runs under my fence. Another thing I've done and be really careful is most of us are gonna be cleaning under the fence because every little piece of grass that touches that fence is gonna suck electrons out of it and be less strong. So you really need to probably mow at least once. Be careful. I hit my pipes all the time. Oh my God. There's a lot of, I'm going to guess I have about 60 PSI in that from the gravity. It's a long fall. So when I cut that, it comes out like a rocket, like it could cut wood. What's important about that, and again, I can't mention everything at once, but it's making me think about it, is I have shutoffs on every single line that comes out of that thing. So I can work on it with 60 PSI. I can't plug it up with a regular plug. There's too much pressure. And then something like that does happen where I break something because I'm a dummy. I can quickly run and shut it off. I won't lose all my water out of that hole. That's limit grazing for the heat. I throw this in here because it's super important to keep records. You don't know where you're going. Wait, what is it? You got to know where you've been to know where you're going. Okay, cool. I can't tell you how much I love having books about what I'm doing. I don't know if you can see this. I have a book here that, oh, that's kind of neat. That I catalog every day what the cattle are doing. Some days it just says, oh shit, and I know something went wrong, but other days it's like, we spent 4 days here. We had a problem. The water's messed up. You can go back and see your progress. If you're really thorough and you want to take data, then you could do an awesome job of every day writing down some features from that grazing stick, how high the forage was when you started, how high the forage was when you left. Weather's important to me, green up, first day of grazing, water. As we talk more about this, drought is and wet is really gonna affect you and your system. So National Cattlemen's Association makes a pretty nice little book. It's called the Red Book. It's tiny, it can fit in your pocket, which is nice. It's got a ton of space. Unless you're raising thousands of cattle, you wouldn't need it all. But even just a regular day planner can be great. It's also really great too, because if you do a grant or you do a presentation, it's good to look back to know where you've been. Like, how long did you really rest that paddock for? Was it actually 26 days or you just remember it all? Or like me, when I have the sacrifice and I decide to skip that area, how am I going to know to skip it if I don't have a record of it? So that's my spiel on data. It's the most valuable thing in the world, as you can see from the folks like Amazon and Google. So keep the value, keep some data. It's not hard. Part of your routine every day. Winter considerations. I threw this picture in here today, which is funny. This is where I had some hay, and that's how I blocked the cattle out from the hay. So you can see how crappy this post has gotten. That's one of my plastic stepping posts. I'm too late. Like every 5 days, I'll probably have to take that apart and redo it. We're not even doing it anymore. The cattle are off hay for the year. But that's just a funny thing. And you can see kind of how I set that up. Here's some of my cattle in the winter. I still remember all their names. And it can be a little scary to run cattle in the winter. And we talked about this before. Whereas you need to choose where you're going to have them for the winter. If you're going to have a sacrifice paddock in one area, if you're going to allow them the free range, which I don't recommend if you have, I have 3 cattle on 70 acres right now. They're not going to do a lot of damage out there, especially if there's hay. But if you got a lot of cattle, they're going to eat the crowns of every single one of those growing plants. And a lot of people make this mistake by letting animals out too early. That will literally set the grass back for months. So make sure you're not grazing until you got at least 8 inches of grass, I would say. It's easier to see that. You think that grass behind me is probably 8 inches on my screen. So that's why the grazing stick comes in important. That's why I called it like a dummy stick at first, like graze, don't graze, graze, don't graze. When you get more into it, you can actually start calculating the amount of forage you have for the day. We haven't even begun to talk about that. The art and the science and the eye of a good grazer, you can kind of make a paddock on the fly, but the grazing stick allows you to calculate exactly how much dry mass forage you have out there for your cattle. So if you have 10 cow-calf pairs, you're eating 33.5% of body weight. So each one of those cows is going to need 35 pounds of dry matter. You can do the calculation on the grazing stick. It tells you right there, okay, I got 500 dry matter pounds. So I'm good for the 10 cattle for a day and a half. We can get more into that as we move along, but sorry, I'm back on winter stuff. So yeah, don't let them, you need to contain them for the winter and sacrifice it. And if you have a really severe overwintering area where this becomes all mud, then you need to stay out there for 2 years, ideally. That's where, and always keep them close. You don't want to be walking a mile. Like I made this mistake in my early farming career. You don't want to set cattle up and then have to walk a mile to feed hay or water when there's 2 feet of snow on the ground. Even when there isn't, it's not efficient. So you want to keep the cattle as close as possible to keep an eye on them. Okay. We already talked about windbreaks. We talked about feeding. We didn't talk that much about hay. You're going to need hay and you're going to need stockpiled forage if possible. Not everybody can do that. If you want to talk more about stockpiled forage, we'll talk about it as part of your plan. But at the very least, you're going to have hay, no doubt. If there's 2 feet of snow or 1 centimeter of ice, the cattle cannot get to the grass. Eating through snow, stockpiled forage is a learned behavior. It's not a natural one. It needs to be taught from moms to calves. So don't expect your cattle to get it right away. Joel Salatin's interesting because when I first started hanging out with him, he overwintered in a barn with stanchions and he would feed hay there. Then he would remove all the hay and the manure and spread it out on the fields. Well, that's not efficient because we're not bringing the animals to the feed. We're bringing the feed to the animals. That's not efficient. So he transitioned to do what I did, which is staging hay. Let me see this now. Staging hay on his fields for the winter. So just like in rotational grazing, he'll put 1 round bale in an area. And because we're not in the growing season, we don't have to worry about the 4-day thing. So it's dead of winter, they can stay out there for 10 days as long as they have enough forage. So the combination of standing hay and that hay bale that you leave out there, whether you unroll it or not, is enough to get them through the winter. And then the manures in the urine is already spread. There's a little extra impact, not too much because it's winter, it's not growing. We can't really impact it too much, but you have all the manure, all the impact being left out there on the field. And secondarily, what you have is that hay ring where you feed that hay, and get a hay ring, please. It's really, for the most part, we talked about this last week. So each bale of hay is probably worth $50 in nutrients and unimaginable amount of organic matter and seed. So you're going to feed that out there and you're going to literally throw compost right there on the ground without spending any diesel. The cattle are going to poop on the hay. They're going to spit some of it out. They're going to pee on it. And that's going to be an amazing pasture for you next year. That's a spot where you come back to next year, you'll see where all the hay rings were. You have the nitrogen there, you have the phosphorus, you have the impact, and it comes back better. So really, as rotating folks, your 2 options are a sacrifice paddock where you feed hay, which is not ideal because you have a lot of nutrients there that probably can't be absorbed in 1 year. You're not going to be able to come back for 2 years. Or you can stage hay to be fed out through the winter across your paddocks. I still would recommend that you use a sacrifice paddock in the very early spring when pugging is a problem. Pugging is the official word when animals step on ground and ruin it. When they put a hole in it, they crush it. That's pugging. And usually it happens in mud. You should not be driving anything on your pastures this time of year when it's wet and soft like this. It'll ruin your pastures. This is how you compact things. If you were to drive a vehicle one time, go do it. I mean, if you don't get stuck, take a ride. You will see where that vehicle drove for at least a year straight, where the grass has been impacted. That's because it's so compacted. So my point is, having a sacrifice paddock this time of year is a great idea because you can bring your herd in off their winter grounds into an area where you can really impact a nasty pugging if you want, and then use that as a sacrifice. Don't come back for 2 years. Otherwise, you can leave. I don't recommend rotating in this weather because you're just going to hurt more and more paddocks. Keep them not moving when early spring, when it's really wet and soft. It's not worth it to rotate at this time. There's no grass anyway. The cattle are inextricably drawn to the first green grass, the green up. All animals are. We know it's a tonic, we know it's food, but that grass is 99% water. It's what old timers call washy. It's too much water, it's too much protein and not enough nutrients. So it's not going to provide them what they need. So they really need hay. For the if you don't have standing forage like I do, up until the time you're ready to start that rotation. So keep that in mind. Feeding hay, I said get a ring bale feeder, but to be quite honest, my most efficient and best way of feeding hay is to unroll a single bale and leave that out there for them to eat for as many days as it takes them to complete that. So when you roll it out, you just move that impact across the whole paddock. And again, we're not going to see that anything is wasted. If they pee on it, they poop on it, I don't care. They just made compost, and that's gonna improve my land. That's great. So if you are going to feed round bales as rounds, then you really should invest in a bale ring. It slows them down. They can't get in it and poop on it. That will create a high impact zone around there. They will pug that ground for sure. So make sure you're moving that ring. If you are going back to that same paddock every year, move it around, just spread it out, spread the impact out. That's all we're trying to do here. I didn't even talk about frozen water yet. It is such an ordeal. So I have 2 emergency ponds dug on my farm that the cattle can access if I need them to. I can just let them in, they can drink. That's cool. But if there's a lot of ice there, they can't do that. Now, cattle can perfectly well eat snow as long as it's that fluffy snow. This was a great year for cattle eating snow. We had feet of that real fluffy stuff. Again, it's a learned behavior. It's not innate inside them. So mothers teach babies to eat snow. It is considered ideal in really cold weather. If you were to have a large bucket of water and that cow in the winter doesn't drink as much, they need more water because the hay is dry, right? They're going to take in 10 gallons of water, which is crazy to me, 7 to 10 gallons in one drink. That is going to bring their core temperature down, way down really quick. So by eating snow, they're taking it in slower and throughout the day. So they're not doing that. So it's actually a great way. You are going to have to figure out how to get water in. And again, if they're close to home, it's not going to be a problem. So I've often used a trash pump. That 2-inch gas-powered trash pump in my stream pumps water into the stock tank. I got a few hundred gallons, however much I need for a day. I'm not rotating much this time of year. And then you have to don't forget to empty all the water out of the pump, otherwise it'll explode and break, and empty the water lines. And that's pretty easy to do. You just disconnect it, put it on your shoulder, and just feed it over, just walk it out. It works really well. On the coldest days of the year in New York that we get, if it's under 0, even if you walk out the water lines and you let the water out of the pump, there still will be frozen ice in there. It's just too cold. What I recommend is you use RV antifreeze. I didn't know about this. It's not toxic. It's a glycol product. It's got some type of stuff in it. And you can just pour that in the top of the pump and let it sit in there. And that won't allow the water to get there and freeze, because it'll freeze your impeller when it's that cold. So that stuff works great. You can drain it out beforehand. If there's any residue, it's non-toxic, so we're not worried about it. In fact, there are some farmers that feed that to their dairy cattle to improve efficiency of feed. Very strange to me, very weird. I don't want my cattle drinking it, but it's a great way to keep things from unfreezing. And then again, when pumps wouldn't start, I have bucketed 200 gallons a day to cattle in 2 5-gallon buckets, doing what's called a farmer carry. You carry 2 5-gallon buckets down by your side. It's called a farmer carry. And I have done that. And actually, Carrie herself may have actually seen me do that in the past. I don't know, but that's farm work, man.
I was just thinking I have seen you do this. Actually.
You see me get water in the winter and do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not easy to do. If you want to get in shape, it's great. But if you got to do it, you got to do it. So keep that in mind. So those are some winter considerations. Another thing I do, so when I am going to get water from a pond or stream. If the stream's moving, I'm in good shape. My stream never freezes up. But if you have a pond, you have to make a hole in it to get out there. And that's where a big rock is your best friend. I used to have an auger, like a hand auger, a Swedish one. It worked okay, but it took forever. You know, it works better? A giant rock, breaking it onto the ice over and over again until you make a hole. Remember, you're going to need multiple rocks because when you finally do break through the ice, the rock is going to go to the bottom and you may end up losing it. Waterproof winter gloves are your best friend. And then a glove warmer, a dryer. I love that thing. I only wear sneakers in the summer now. I don't wear boots anymore. They do not serve me. When I'm rotating, when I'm walking, I don't use a truck. I don't even own a truck. I walk to my rotation no matter where it is with typically all of my equipment. So to be nimble, to be quick, I use sneakers, like regular old running trail shoes. They usually last a season. They're going to be soaking wet. You saw the grass in that first picture. It's up to here. If I get out there at 6 a.m., I am literally soaking wet. I have to change my underwear when I get to work. Like I'm that wet every day. So boots aren't going to help me at that point. I'd rather have support on the bottom and rather have something I can just put on that boot dryer or that glove dryer when I get home every day, and they're dry by the next day. They work great. I highly recommend them. I think a boot dryer is the farmer's best friend, to tell you the truth. So that's my spiel on winter and water. The other side of that's going to be droughts. It'll happen. If you don't follow Troy Bishop, AKA the Grass Whisperer in New York, he is hilarious. And he wrote an article a couple years ago, sorry I didn't come to your pity party for your drought or something, because he's done a really good job grazing. He was not even affected by the drought. I told you guys before, it's not about how much water you get, it's how much you keep. That's what Troy has done. Troy has grazed so that he has massive sponges across his entire farm in the form of organic matter that retain water. So when that drought comes, the grass survives. You know when the drought's coming, late July, when that summer slump of our cool season grasses happen. It's a double whammy. If you get a drought and you have predominantly cool season grasses like we do, nothing is going to grow for a month. We saw the pictures. If you go out there and you eat 80% of that grass, it's not going to grow back. It's not going to grow back for months either. So just keep that in mind. We had 2 years of drought when I wrote this in 2016. It's really tough on the animals. The best thing you can do in a drought is to destock, get rid of cattle, because your other options are literally hurt grass or feed hay. Neither of those things are sustainable. Selling cattle is. Now, you don't sell the whole herd, but if you can sell a few to take the pressure off, that's your best case scenario. Most people are terrified to do that. I don't know why. Why? Retaining these cattle is going to cost you more money. Don't be afraid to sell, because no one else is generally selling that time. If you're on the front of that buying market, you can get decent prices for your animals, okay? It says here how I messed up this year. That I'm not going to get into all that because it's a little over the scope of this. This is for a different program, but I was talking there about the wet spring. Sometimes we have water, rain until June. Again, you're going to have to get out there feeding, but if that pugging's happening, it's going to cause damage. So, and you never want to drive or be on the pasture with a tractor when it's this wet out there. So yeah, the drought stuff, we're not going to have a drought this year, but I bet we have one the year after that. So plan for it. Think about what you're going to do when it gets really dry, and how you're going to be able to get rid of cattle or buy in hay. If you got to buy in hay, you can, but it obviously gets more expensive during drought. Now, I don't know how many of you are making hay. Probably all of you think you want to make hay, but I don't make hay anymore. It is much better to have someone come and make hay for me, or better yet, like we talked about last week, I want to bring the hay in because it's so very valuable in everything that we do. But get it early, store your hay appropriately. It really needs to be under cover unless it's out there for just a year. I don't cover my hay anymore. It was only out there for a few months of the winter. And if it's not getting rained on all the time, usually retains its value. So hay is typically a buyer's market for the most part, except for a year like this. So I can call around and have someone deliver hay to me. It's been under wrap. I didn't make it. I mean, I buy them for $50. I know it costs more than that to make a bale of hay. I know it does. Just in an hour basis in depreciation and labor and diesel and ties and all the time you have to spend working on that stuff, I'd rather have someone else to do it. It's just so valuable to me. If you stop making hay on your farm, you can feed it to animals. I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. I mean, so many people are like, well, if I don't have hay, what am I going to feed in the winter? Buy your hay. If you don't make that hay, you can have 20 more cattle every year. That's what we want to do. We want to bring animals to the grass, and that's a great way to do that. The more animals you have in a responsible manner, the better you can be. The more nutrients you bring onto the farm from outside, the better off your place will be. It all makes sense. So things that are frustrating, typically with rotational grazing. This is weird because I've had a steer do this and that gate broke right in half, or it didn't break, it bent like this. It's actually pretty common. Things that are frustrating. Things that all ranchers face, your cattle will get out, okay? They're gonna get out. So you better have them bucket trained to come back. You better be on good terms with them so they're not as scared of you when they see you. So a little lesson here, if you have multiple species on your farm, try to use different buckets for them, different colors, or better yet, different patterns. So when in the past I've had chicken tractors in my fields with cattle, the cattle have broken into my chicken tractors to get leftover buckets they see in there. So I like to differentiate how treats are given to the chickens, or how the chickens are fed and how the cattle are fed. So I'll have one, if I do use a bucket, I'll spray paint it to be a special pattern, like crisscrosses or polka dots. And then what I'll do is I'll walk around and get the cattle. Like I'll spend an hour doing this, just having fun with the cattle. I'll bring a bag out. I'll put my whatever treat is, alfalfa pellets. I use a little bit of grain. I'm not 100% grain free. I use a tiny little bit of grain for sweet feed, for treats sometimes, because it's an emergency. I want them to always come when I need them. I'll fill that bucket up and I'll walk it around and I'll just pour it out and make them follow me. If they get aggressive, I immediately take the bucket away. If that animal learns that if it bucks up on you and you drop that bucket and run away, it will continue to do it to gain access to the feed. Any aggressive behavior, anything you don't like, stop it in its tracks. That's when that time you can yell, because you want to assert your dominance over that animal. So if an animal bucks me or is getting to it, I'll say, stop. And then I won't do anything else. I'll just yell and then keep going on with my day. If it gets bad, I'll completely leave the situation. The cattle will learn that that bucket has a treat for them. And they will often follow you to the ends of the earth if you have a good enough treat. That's what I'll say I'll use grain for when I have an emergency. When my cattle got out last year because the owner drove through the fence, didn't tell me, and broke it, and my herd left and was in the neighbor's yard, it was very easy for me to get that bucket and call them all to me. Some are obviously much more food motivated than others for certain treats, and they're your friends. So cows will get out, be prepared. Cows not doing what you want. I talked about this when we talked about handling. You're not a good grazer yet. You're not a good animal handler if you're new. It's okay. You guys can learn together. So yeah, calm, cool, patient. If you're frustrated, don't take it onto the cattle. Pinch yourself. I don't care what you got to do. Don't make a situation worse, okay? Castration issues. We haven't even come close to talking about health stuff. It's outside of the scope of this, but stick with me and I'm willing to help you. I've castrated it every way possible and I've had problems with every way possible. There's no good way to make a hole in an animal, take a part of it out and put it back together. You're going to run into problems eventually, whether it's fly strike, whether it's a stag with the testicle stuff inside of it, which is a nightmare for me. A few years ago, so when I had the lane, I don't know what year this was, I had the lane for the cattle. I might have talked about this last week. I don't know. And I had a stag. He had an extra nut inside him they didn't get. You know, you think it's easy to count 1, 2, but if you use a band, you're not counting. You're just hoping those testicles fall off. They don't always fall off. One can get pushed up inside and stay there. So then you typically have an animal that cannot breed, but is just as aggressive and acts like a bull. But what happened was when we were in that lane, my bull and the stag would fight for like an hour, full on snorting, spitting, screaming, dominant fight for who rules the roost, and they would rip down my lane. They literally would destroy it. So that's the problem with having stags. Also, a couple years ago, I had a stag, unbeknownst to me, and he impregnated 3 of my cattle, which basically became worthless when I sold them because they were supposed to be for me. So when you do castrate, do it early. I recommend you cut them out if you can. It's not a really disgusting procedure. It's actually pretty easy. And I don't recommend the bands just because there's a possibility for stags, although I have used a million bands in my life. Then there are some just typically grass-based issues. So underutilization of pastures, that's not a problem for you. That's not a problem for you. Underutilization of pastures is not a problem. We don't care if we're not making cattle clean up pastures. I see that all the time. We don't know why cows eat certain things. I told you the cattle can pick macronutrients, not microbes. If a certain plant has protein and their body needs it, they're going to eat that plant and not the other. It is no matter what you planted there or what you spend a bunch of money on seed or fertilizer on, they're going to eat what they need. And that may not be what you want. So don't worry about utilization. So what you will see though, and this is okay, is you're gonna let the cattle out there for the day. And if it's not a super heavy mob, if you're not running like the 50 cattle in an acre, they're gonna selectively graze out there. Okay, we're not gonna make them clean up the stuff they don't want because we don't understand why they're not eating it. For all we know, there could be a bit of prussic acid. There could be a weird poison. That's not why they're eating it. If we make them clean up, they will lose weight. It goes against our system. So don't ever make cattle clean stuff up. If it's not used, it's okay. Again, I told you, there's no such thing as wasted forage. When you can run into issues is if you have a lot of forbs and weeds. And I talked about some strategies for that last week at length, but let's say I'm in a paddock and the cattle selectively graze and they leave a lot of multiflora rose or mugwort. I will go out there and I'll knock that stuff down and try to mow it down. If I can, oftentimes I can't. So I don't have a lot of options for you for that. You're going to see the weeds high and you're going to see the grass low. Ideally, you can mow that on foot. If you're going to be out there driving a tractor all around your pasture, you're going to compact it. Even in the middle of summer, in the best of conditions, you're still going to compact that ground. So it's up to you and your goals if it's worth it to mow those weeds down. And we can do an IPM, integrated pest management thing. See, it doesn't exist, but that'd be good research. Basically seeing if the count of weeds, the type, and the amount, if you should mow that pasture or leave it be. I can't tell you that. I'm going to invent this at some point, but just keep in mind, just the general rule of thumb here, don't make your animals clean up pasture, okay? Overgrazed pastures or anything that's going to be more than 4 days. It's as simple as that. Or if you didn't have enough food out there for the animals. So that's where that grazing eye comes in, or that grazing stick, where you can estimate the amount of forage that exists in that paddock. You've left them enough food for the day. So you don't come back and you see a lot of underutilized forage, a lot of weeds, and a lot of bawling or unhappy cattle. Or unfull. I told you how you can tell if they're full in that triangle on their left-hand side. That means they've eaten to their capacity. So overgrazing is way worse than undergrazing. I showed you the pictures last week, how it doesn't come back if you abuse it. So keep that in mind, especially if you abuse it during the hottest time of the year. Animals not finishing properly. I will tell you right now, finishing an animal on grass is extremely difficult. It takes time and it takes good forage. I have messed up many cattle. And I don't know if I can go into it in this, but actually, there's a class coming up in a couple weeks from Cornell about how to finish your animals. Mike Baker's teaching it. I'll send you all the link. Mike. Okay. It's going to be great, but he's going to go over how to tell. Me and Mike did this class about a month ago. I showed him some pictures and said, Mike, is this cow finished? He said, yes. It wasn't. There are genetic freaks out there too. A miniature cow is actually technically called a dink. I don't know why. I always thought it was funny, but I've had some smaller frame cows that didn't finish right. So genetics can really make a big difference. But what you really need is a 24 to 28 month old animal that has consistently been on good forage and eating as much as it can fit for at least 90 days. That's how you finish an animal. If you do not have that, if you are forcing an animal to clean up, if it does not have the appropriate amount of water on grass, this is just grass, folks. If you're supplementing with grain, you're gonna have a much easier time finishing an animal. But if you don't have all those things dialed in, you're not gonna be able to finish properly. Do not think that you can finish an animal your first or second year and be able to sell it as wholesome meat. You're not. The biggest problem we have in marketing grass-fed meat is people doing a poor job finishing cattle and selling it as grass-fed meat. It's tough. It's not gamey. I don't know where that comes from. It's just tough. There's not enough fat in it. It doesn't taste good. The last animal I just processed came out prime, which isn't supposed to happen in grass-fed cattle, but I got the calculation down. So do yourself a favor, do all of us grass-fed finishers a service, and do your customers a solid and only finish animals appropriately. Talk to your butcher. If you get an animal that comes through that isn't up to par, that they know right away what it's going to grade when they look at it. They can usually tell when they slaughter it, like when they cut it in half. If it's not going to grade prime or high select, then cut it up and just make it all in a hamburger with added fat. It's much better to sell all that hamburger at a little bit of a cheaper price and still make money than sell really crappy steaks that are too tough and no one's ever going to come back and they're going to talk about it. So finishing animals is an art. I'll send you that link that we're going to have that class in a couple weeks. I love this trampoline. It's so crazy. But how to make money farming, become allergic to spending. The way you make money on farming is on the front end by being lean. I run a lean operation. No tractor, no truck, no ATV at this point. I will need a way to move heavy stuff though, so I will have to invest in a truck or fix one up. Pay someone else to make your hay. Pay for the hay. Pay someone to dig your ponds. If you don't have a tractor and you're not using it every day, you're not getting good value out of it. There's no reason to have a tractor you only use a couple times a year. It's a waste, unless it's really old. If you got a beater and you got a good deal and you're fixing it yourself, that's fine. But if you go out and lease a tractor and you're not using it every day, you're wasting it. That thing needs to run at all times to be efficient. Don't be afraid to, I mean, so many people get into like this thing where they want to have the nicest farm because they don't really understand what we're doing here. I'm not trying to look good. I'm trying to raise animals appropriately on pasture. I don't need a shiny tractor. I don't need the nicest stuff. And I think a lot of people get into that. I'm going to go at you when we compare systems. I'm going to compare the size of my wallet, how much I made, and the way my grass and my animals look against whatever else you want to show me. Your Lamborghini tractor, I don't care. I'm going a little bit off topic. My point is the way to make money in farming, again, is on the front end. When you sell an animal, when you sell meat, you don't have a lot of say in how much it's going to cost. The market dictates that. But you sure as hell have enough say on how much you're going to spend on a tractor, on amendments, on spiffy toys and things that you need. So that is truly the way to make money farming. I can't stress that enough. Yeah. Become allergic to spending money. I'm serious. Multi-species grazing is awesome. I love it. I wish it was easier. So the ultimate, up here on the top, you have a really good example of that. Ideally, goats and cattle would be pretty much the perfect two grazers together. A close second would be sheep and cattle, then sheep and goats, I guess. Pigs really shouldn't be on pasture, in my opinion, unless you're really doing a full renovation, and even that's going to require a lot of tractor work. Poultry works nice. I've had bad luck with poultry as far as decreasing my face fly and horn fly. I'm supposed to send you guys something about last week, and I'm sorry, I forgot. I haven't had good luck with having chickens impact my fly numbers, but they are very healthy if they're out there. So the biggest problem with multi-species grazing is your fencing. You're not going to do well if you have your goats and your sheep and the goats can go wherever they want, or goats and cattle. So it's really tough to make a fence that will hold cattle and goats. It's easier to do one that will hold cattle and sheep, like in this picture down here. They also have livestock guardian dogs, because coyotes will eat sheep and will eat lambs and will eat baby goats, no problem. Cattle will kill a coyote if they get the chance. I've seen my cattle kill a groundhog, and I've seen them chase coyotes, and I've seen them chase foxes, which is amazing. My point is, if you can bond your sheep or your goats to the cattle, they'll have a much better chance of survival. If you have 5-strand, really hot fence, keep the coyotes out, they'll have a much better chance of survival. But you just can't throw sheep and goats out with cattle and hope they'll be okay. If you have goats and you have cattle, you're gonna need a fence, a strand that's like 8 inches off the ground, 12 inches, 18, and then probably 24, 36. You're gonna need like 5 strands, and that's not really sustainable. The sheep, you can probably get by with 2 really hot ones, especially if they're bonded. Obviously, the chickens can free range wherever they want. They don't need fencing, but that's the biggest impediment to multi-species. Now, you can do what's called a leader-follower deal. And I do this often. If I have my race cars, my best, the ones I'm trying to put the weight on, my finishing animals, those are my race cars, I'll run them in front of my cow-calf herd. Now, the mobs need a lot of nutrition, but they don't need it like my race cars need. So leader-follower, I've got 5 cattle in front of the mom and babies, the cow calves. They eat first, and the next day everybody moves forward. So the cow calf pairs go into where the race cars were before, and the race cars get a new paddock. So they get the best of the best. And you can use any class of animal to have there, and you can do it with other species too. So you could run, your cattle first, who you're finishing, and then your sheep second as a cleanup crew, or goats. And then you can adjust your fencing as necessary like that. But ideally, it's always best to run one herd with all your animals. Splitting herds is highly inefficient. And again, we don't even have scope to talk about this, but retaining a bull is a problem when you get into that situation, because you have to separate him out. Oh, I didn't talk much about horses. You can multi-species graze them, that's great, but horses and sheep are really tough on pasture because they have teeth on both ends. and they can go right to the bottom of the grass and eat the whole thing. So you got to be really careful with that. So yeah, if you would like to do that, I'm totally willing to help, and let's see what you can do. Oh, watering is another thing too. Sheep and goats can't necessarily drink out of a cattle water. It might be too high, or they can get in it and it just gets nasty. So you really got to do a lot of planning. I added this one today. I don't know where we're going next. Okay, yeah. We're almost getting to the end. I added this today because oftentimes a huge mistake that beginners make is buying really expensive stock for their first animals. They're enamored with a special species or a look of an animal or promises of the riches it will bring you, like Wagyu. Has anybody in this class bought Wagyu meat in the last 5 years? I never have either, but I get calls all the time of people telling me that they're buying Wagyu cattle to sell. I don't know who they're selling it to, but I do know that whoever's marketing, and I'm not picking on Wagyu, this goes for everything, Scottish Highlanders, high-end dairy, whatever it is, they're selling you, they're marketing you on something that probably doesn't exist. Like the only way you're going to be good at finishing animals and delivering a product is practice. You can't buy it in. You can buy in decent genetics, don't get me wrong, but this is not the time to spend $5,000 on a bull and then have it get sick or die on you because it's your first year. So don't do that. Don't make that mistake. Don't buy into the hype. Don't think that there's also no such thing as, and so one of you may get upset about this, or multiple people, but there's more difference within a herd than between different breeds. There's not mean breeds. There's not genetically off breeds. There's not nicer breeds. It all deals with how you treat them or how the person before them treated them. Now, there are genetic issues. There are animals that I have that have disabilities, that have something off, that they do not act like the other cattle. Those are major problems for me. The Amish and the anthropothecists, the folks that do biodynamics, they are really into hair whorls. And they are a sign of nutrition in cattle, especially on their lower belly. But they believe, and I think there's some merit in this, depending on where the hair whorls are on the head of a cow can tell you a lot about its personality and if it's an off cow. I don't remember how it is. Look it up if you want to learn about it. But the cattle that I've had that have been off, that have not been right, have had smaller heads with different kind of hair whorls. I don't know what that means. These are the cattle. And if any of you watch my video series, I recommend you watch those like 25 1-minute videos. I show you where the skittish cattle are. I show you them in my herd. Get rid of them. Just like customers, when I talk about marketing grass-fed beef, 1% of your customers are going to cause 99% of your problems. Same thing with the cattle. 1% of those off cows are going to cause a lot of problems. If you have a skittish cow that freaks out, it's going to teach all of your cows to be that way. The energy will perpetuate through the herd. You'll feel it, and the calves will really get into it. So if I walk up and this cow gets spooked and runs off, it'll teach the calves to go. Get rid of those animals as soon as you can. There's something off of them and you don't need them around. In the same regard, well, I guess it's different. If you're going to buy $5,000 worth of animal, you're never going to be able to sell back and make that much. Buy typical animals to make the mistakes that beginner makes on. Now, I'm not going to say you're going to abuse or make these animals suffer, but if something does go wrong, they're going to be more able to take it. If they do need treatment, people in the area are going to be more familiar with them. The Highlanders are a special breed. Does anybody here have Highlanders right now? Scottish Highlanders, the emo cows with all the hair. They're ubiquitous. They're so popular, they're basically free on Craigslist. I see them for free quite often. And the reason that is because people get sold on them being so cute, they have great meat. They're a lot of times they're unprocessable. Their horns are so large, they can't fit into typical load-ins. So the butcher won't take them. They also have so much hair on their body, it gets on the meat. So a lot of butchers won't take them then. So I've still got people in my area that are dead set on selling these amazing animals that produce this great meat, but it's all not true. Like, it's tough. You're handicapping yourself. So make sure you buy animals that are common, that are known, that are easy to work on, and that are proven in your area. That's a whole other thing. So you're going to go out and you're going to buy the newest, greatest $5,000 bull that came from a catalog that you saw that had epigenetics that are through the roof. This thing made 50 million spermatozoa. It impregnated 1,000 cows in a week and blah, blah, blah. But remember, that was in a barn on the best feed possible, with probably sex with mating assistants. Who knows what they're doing to that cow? You're going to bring that $5,000 bull to your place with a little bit of heat, high grass and no grain. It's going to fall apart. It's going to not even be able to breed. It's going to be a mess. Don't believe all that hype. Find someone, when you buy your animals, that's raising animals the way that you're raising them. Buying grass-fed cattle. You don't need to buy the best genetics, like I'm saying. Just go find some old timer that she's got 20 cattle on the back 40 that have been there for years. Those are tough cows. They're probably very highly parasite resistant. Buy those cows. Don't buy the expensive ones. They're going to fall apart on your land when you can't match the type of care they've received in the past. Okay. Also, more power to them, but I don't want your dairy calendar with your epigenetics on it, because what does that mean to me? Like, these parameters were literally made just to sell you something that you can't see. I can't see that animal's genes. I can't see its sperm or zoa. I can't see its ovaries. What I can see is how it does on pasture and how it looks on its current system. So when I go on Craigslist and that woman's got those on the back 40, I can go there and look at them. They look great. They're on crappy pasture. They're doing okay. They're in the heat of the summer. They're out here and they're just eating grass. They're not propped up on grain. They are matched very closely to my system. That's a recipe for success. It's very easy to get caught up in the excitement, especially when you have a good salesman or saleswoman in front of you selling this stuff to you. They are good. That's their job. Your job is to match the class of cattle to your resources, period. That's so important. I'm going to write that down. I'm going to remind you guys that. Match class to resources. Okay. Big mistake. I hope that makes sense to everybody. Marketing. I got a whole 2-hour class on this, folks. I told you what the biggest mistake is in grass-fed. It's selling crappy meat that wasn't properly finished to other to people who want grass-fed meat, and it turns them off on it forever. You can always finish on grain. There's nothing wrong with that. I think finishing on grain is typically a better, especially if it's local grain. All right, if it's coming from Brazil, it's not so great. If you can finish on grain and make good meat, wholesome meat to eat, that's great. Okay, again, you got to look at the whole system. You can't be dogmatic in farming. You really can't be dogmatic in a lot of things. This is holistic. Things change. We are part of nature. We are not it. We don't get to make those big decisions. So from a holistic standpoint, if I have 2 cows that I'm not gonna be able to finish, we've run out of grass because we had a drought, and they're not worth processing, and my processing dates are coming up in 3 months, I would very much consider finishing these 2 animals on grain, and then either selling them to someone that wants grain-fed meat or eating it for myself. So just saying, be flexible in the things you can use. Like Joel says, you can be a nudist, you can be a Buddhist, you can't be a nudist Buddhist, but I guarantee there's some out there. Finishing cattle on grass, I talked a lot about this. It is not easy to do. This year, I'm doing some custom grazing and backgrounding. I've become a good enough grazer that other people are giving me their animals to graze. I see we have something in the chat here. Let's see. Question on grain. Carrie, hit me.
Hey, are you familiar with people using spent brewer's grain for cattle?
Yes. Yes.
What are your thoughts?
All right, let's think about it from a great question, by the way. Wait, Carrie, don't mute yourself yet. That grain, what was taken out of that grain? When you think about it.
Sugar.
Yes, bingo, energy. They took it all out. They made it so you could get drunk with your friends on St. Patrick's Day. It no longer exists, which means it has very little nutritional value for energy. So you can use it. A lot of people use it for cows, but it's not a panacea. It's not going to cure anything. It's actually a very low level of nutrition, high fiber product. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
There's a great website, I will put it in your notes, called Feedtopia. It tells you the feed characteristics of many different types of things and weird alternative feeds like brewer's grains. It'll tell you exactly what it's made of. So you can make decisions on, if you are going to feed a lot of that, what else you need to supplement it with. Cattle are meant to eat grass. They're not meant to eat grain. They can eat a little bit of grain, but not much. If you feed a lot of grain, you get what's called acidosis. And we talked about this before. We are grass farmers that are feeding miniature biological beings. We don't process food, the organisms and the bacteria inside of us do. Same with the cattle. You feed it too much grain, you feed a ruminant a lot of grain, it changes the pH of their stomach and it kills all the grass eating bacteria, they die. And it can no longer efficiently process grass. And you've stitched its belly to really be processing grain, and that will make the animal sick eventually. Feedlot animals are not healthy animals. I'm not getting down on feedlots, it's just a fact of life. Those animals are not healthy from a biological standpoint. So custom grazing is when I take in animals from someone else. Backgrounding is typically used with dairy. It's when you bring in dairy animals for the winter. I have a lot of grass, so I want to use all of it within reason. And a lot of people abuse their pasture, and you'll see people feeding hay in July. So I'm getting $1 a day this year. It can change wildly. I don't think you could do it for I'm getting $1 a day per cow that I custom graze. I don't think you could do it for cheaper from a labor standpoint. If you're feeding hay, I'm not kidding. You were talking $5 a day per animal. If you're feeding hay to animals, it's a lot of money because there's a lot of handling materials. So don't think you can bring in a lot of animals in the winter from another farm and background them. It's not efficient unless you're getting decent money. But when I got extra grass, I got 300 acres. I'm finishing 7 cattle. I'll take 30 or 40 or 50 stockers or custom animals to eat that grass, and I'll get $1 a day. So I can make $50 a day for an hour of work. That's what my chores take per day. I walk out to the field in the morning. I say hello to the goats. I walk by them as they cry and complain because I'm not giving them any grain. I walk out. I say hello to the cows. They go, yip, yip, yeah. I open up their thing. They come through. I say hello to all of them. I close them in. I go take down the fence from the day before, the one line. I walk up, pick it up under my arm. And if you watch those videos, you'll see me do this, I think. I walk around. I set up the new line. I go back. I move the water. I move the mineral, and I go home. It's an hour. And most of that time is 30 minutes walking to the cattle. So I don't know how I got on that. But anyway, just like incompatible goals, marketing with compatible people is super important. We are all really good at some things, and we all enjoy typically doing things we're good at. We don't enjoy certain things. If you have a partner that forms a complementary, I don't know what you want to call it, is a complementary partner with you, that is the best thing in the world. And I see this a lot in farming, where someone's really interested in animal husbandry, they love and they communicate better with animals and nature, and the other person's more into sales and data and is like a neat freak and inventory stuff. That is such a great combo. So if you're going to go into direct sales, I really recommend that you have 2 people. I don't think it's really that efficient and sustainable to do it alone. Some of you may have to, and that's okay. It's just really tough. If you guys want to talk more about sales, we can set up. I'm perfectly happy to set up a webinar on sales here. I'm going to send you what do they call that? An evaluation. If you want to do a sales one, or if you want any classes, write in the notes of that evaluation what you want, and I'll put it together, and we'll see if we can get together in a month or so and do it. Because I think this is something we could talk about for many hours, and you could learn from a ton of my mistakes. So, okay, my voice is going now. Oh, we're at the end. This picture is crazy. I don't know. This happens actually more than you would think. I'd be very scared of this cow. I don't know if you know this too. We didn't talk about safety, but cows don't just kick backwards like horses. They have like a 180-degree kick. So their back leg will come up and they go for their ear and they come around to their back. It can hit you all over. So be really careful. Like I said, I was behind a cow a couple years ago and I was with a buddy, and it didn't like something I did, and it reared up and it kicked me and it snapped its hoof and it snapped my finger. I thought it ripped my finger off. It hit me so hard. And it was like a whip crack, and it just cracked my finger right up. And I really couldn't have avoided that, but just be careful you don't get kicked. It's really easy. These are my heroes, people that I look up to, that I read their blogs. Just for cattle, I have more than this, but for cattle, Joel Salatin has been great. He's at the silver tongue. Is that an insult? Maybe it is. It's biblical, I think. He is a great talker. He is the gift of gab. How's that? He's a great marketing person. He really cares about what he's doing, and he's willing to admit when he's wrong. So if you can learn from him, I think I recommended. I'm not supposed to recommend a lot of books, but if you're getting into farming, Your Successful Farm Business by Joel Salatin is the best farming book I've ever read on business, and it's written by and for farmers. Greg Judy, who's the other guy? So I can't remember right now. My brain's kind of fried. He's got a lot of great videos. He's a Midwestern grazer. He's a guy that I took a lot of my techniques from, mob grazing, and he's great videos. Ian Mitchell Innes is like the Buddha philosophy guy of grazing. He'll never talk to you about numbers or fencing or water. I've seen him speak, but you will leave there like inspired. He's the guy that talks about 5,000. He runs literally 5,000 cattle at a time in one mob. It's really crazy in Africa. And that's very arid land, so he's doing a very good job. Alan Savory is the guy who killed 70,000 elephants in the 70s. They thought they were calling desertification, but they weren't. Alan Nation, another guy he's an old timer with a lot of books. If I have an entire library here, I'm actually looking for a library that will take my library. I've contacted 2 and neither of them wanted them. But if you need book recommendations, feel free to hit me up and I'm happy to do that. Publications too, I told you guys about On Pasture. They're very handsome, very knowledgeable authors, but it seriously is, it's been going on for probably 4 years. It has a back catalog from that blog that has enough information to keep you busy for years. Anything you want to learn about grazing, it's in there, and it's written by farmers for farmers again. So I wrote that rating thing to remind me to tell you guys to do the evaluation. I need a break. Who else wants to talk? Nobody has anything they want to mention right now. While we're here.
I have a question.
Hit me.
Do you have any general guidelines on, I know you mentioned like you do 50 cows on half an acre a day. Do you have any general guidelines on like how we can create those grazing plans, or just resources actually? Because I'm sure it's way more than you can talk about in 20 minutes.
Well, what you need to do first of all is know how much forage you have. So you need a grazing stick to estimate that. Once you can do that, you can say, because everybody's forage is different. My farm's completely different depending on where I am. There are places where I can get 50 cows on half an acre, and there's places where I'd have to use 3 acres because it's so different, the forage. So once you can estimate how much forage you have in a space, and that has to do with the density of it, like we talked about, and the height of it, you can say, okay, I have 5,000 pounds here. I have 5 cows, I need 1,000 pounds each. I'm right on for today. I would leave a little buffer there. That's how you start with that. Another rule of thumb too I like to do is, and it's so old school, keep half, leave, take half, leave half. It's simple as that. And that involves the trampling, the manuring, the urination. Take half the grass, leave half, you'll be in good shape. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, so once you get that grazing stick and you can start estimating, then we can start matching the number of animals to the amount of grass that you have. If you overestimate, if you start overgrazing, you're gonna have to buy hay or get rid of animals. So you always want to be a little bit under. And that's why market planning and this business plan, like I told you, what separates the successful people from the not successful typically is that plan, because you originally you penned in 10 animals. That's your market plan because you're making 20 grand. Well, we can't do it. We don't have the forage. We got to run 12. Now we need to go back, look at that plan and make adjustments for either we can save money, charge more for our product, or even that out. You got to have it written down. So when you get the grazing stick carry by calling the NRCS, they send you one in the mail because it's your tax money. We can start talking about that.
So basically, like, we have a little bit of grass coming up right now, but there's really nothing, obviously. So if this is our first year, like rotating them intensively, we basically just want to keep them in the sacrifice paddock until there's enough forage based on the grazing stick, and then you like have to customize your whole plan based on that. There's no like.
No, you can eyeball it. You're going to develop a grazer's eye. So you can just don't undervalue them. I mean, if you're out there every day, you make a paddock, it's too small, they're going to tell you, they're going to cry, they're going to try to break through the fence. If that happens, you need to make a bigger fence the next day. And if you get out there and they've barely touched it, and make sure they're actually barely touching it and not just selectively grazing, because God, this topic is so big. The cattle are only typically going to eat the top few inches of the grass. That's where most of the energy is. So they're going to bite onto that. So it can be easy to look out on a whole field and think they didn't touch it, and they did. So you can just adjust it on the fly. That's perfectly fine. You don't have to do the calculations, but don't underfeed them.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, don't put them out till you have 8 inches of grass. Don't let, because you're going to risk plugging that ground and hurting it. And if they, even in the winter, like I said, if they take a bite out of that crown, it'll set the pasture back for months. Okay. What else, guys?
I'm not entirely sure how on topic this is, but I'm listening to all of this and I'm realizing that since the farm that I work on is not my farm, and the farm has been managed by several people over several years. I mean, just within the last year, it's been like 3 different people. I was like what you said about the cows and like calling them. I'm realizing that there's not like loose ends to tie up, but there's so much. I don't even know what I'm trying to say because I'm like overwhelmed by how much
Know how you feel.
I'm realizing. Like,
yep, that's
oh
okay.
God.
It's one step at a time. Every day that you're there is a better day for those cattle and operate.
Right. And it's what's interesting is like, unfortunately, all of our cows are not on location. Like at full moon, we have so many pastures all over town. And that just makes managing them,
yeah,
time
Time consuming. You
consuming.
got to drive
Yeah.
between. Yeah. Is there a way to combine the herds, you think?
I don't know, strictly based on like the size of the pastures we have. They all live so happily and comfortably how we're doing it already. But I
Mhm.
think about like
But it's not just about them. It's about everybody in the situation.
right,
Oh,
exactly. And I'm sitting here thinking about how much more we could do if they were condensed. I mean,
Yeah,
I
man.
spend like 5 hours of my 9 to 10 hour day just driving
Yeah,
in
that's
the summer.
crazy. So think about that. That doesn't have to, that can't, that wouldn't be your priority for this year. You're probably gonna try
Right.
this year, but you can do an awful lot of planning and thinking while you're out there in those fields or driving, I guess. Hope you like
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
but the way you're thinking is really healthy. I'm into it.
Okay, good. Great.
You can't fix everything, but you can
Yeah.
start. And that's why setting goals is so important. That's why I want all of you to have goals. So is your goal to make a plan to graze one mob next year? Cool. Then did you reach it? I don't know. Is your goal to do whatever?
Yeah. Yeah. This was good. This was really good.
Okay, good. Yeah, it's kind of philosophical. Grazing is not just cut and dry. Nothing.
Yeah. I'm realizing that. Yes.
Yeah. But I'm here for you. If you ever just want to talk too, I'm also here. I can talk for him all day.
All right. Thank you.
What else, guys? My wife's cooking. I'm getting hungry. I can smell it. If no one has anything else that's killing them, I'm fine to stop now because I'm tired of talking. This takes a lot out of me, if you can believe it. But I'm gonna send you a follow-up email on Monday like I did last time. There'll be a evaluation there. Please do it. I need them. And then please tell me if you want to do another class. We'll do it for free. I will do a marketing class if you guys want to do it. And we can all sit down and just chat. And I'll invite some other people to come talk too. So do the evaluation. I will in the email too. I also send out a contact for me so each of us can have our orientation and talk separately via Zoom. Or maybe if you're in Ulster County or Orange County or Columbia County, I could probably come visit you. If not, I'm not going to be allowed to typically. And we can go from there. So thank you for coming. This was a lot of talking. There's a lot of information to take in. Just take a break, absorb it, go do something completely different now. Don't even think about it. I get really excited when I read stuff about grazing when I was especially young, and it would like kind of overwhelm me and I'd have to take a break. So I recommend you do that too. So thank you for coming. I know you all learned something. Keep in touch. I'll be in touch on Monday. Watch the videos, do the homework, and keep on grazing. And call me if you need anything. I'm always here. I'll have my phone number in the email. All right, guys.
Thanks so much.
All right, guys. Have a good night. I'll be in touch, everybody. Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Thank you. It was great.
Thank you.